Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today, I will be illustrating a concept of law through examples and scenarios so you can gain a better understanding. Today's legal topic we will be going over is Intro to Contracts. Let's jump right into it. What is a contract? A contract is an agreement that will affect or create a legal relationship between two or more persons. Some quick examples of contracts would be buying a house or car, making an agreement for something between two or more people to hopefully be purchased. When it comes to contracts, there are two theories that always must be met. First, we have the will theory, and that states there needs to be a meeting of the minds between the parties involved in the contract. Next, we have the formulist theory, and this one states there needs to be a meeting of the elements between the parties involved in the contract. There are five elements that I will be covering next in greater detail, but I have to go over one more theory actually, the least important theory to say the least, the equity theory. This was an older theory, so it's not very important anymore. Matter of fact, it got so old, the will theory just ended up replacing it. The five elements of a contract are offer, acceptance, consideration, capacity, and legality. To gain a better understanding of each one, let me give them some examples. First up, offer, an idea or suggestion to create a contract. Next, acceptance, an agreement or consent to a contract. Then we got consideration, both sides of the parties thinking heavily into making an exchange. After consideration, we've got capacity, which is a factual analysis centered on whether the person can contract. Lastly, we have legality, and that is a legal analysis of whether the contract is illegal or against public policy. It should not go through. Now we have many types of contracts to go over, but we'll start with bilateral and unilateral. An example of bilateral would be a contract to sell a car. One person is promising to pay for the car, while the other person promises to transfer and give ownership of the car to them. Both sides are doing and gaining something out of it. Next, we've got unilateral, and an example of this would be swimming across a tank of sharks for a free vacation or money. Unilateral contracts are usually crazy because they are rarely achievable most of the time. Next type of contracts we have are express, implied, and quasi. An example of express would be an actual contract written on paper in written words or being spoken aloud orally to be heard. An example for implied would be the relationship between a doctor and patient. Nothing to do with their words, just their actions. Finally, an example of quasi would be an individual is rushed to the hospital. Their bill for their care came out to be $7,500. Although the individual never asked for care, still responsible to pay the bill. It is enforced by the law. The next type of contracts we will be going over are the two that I find to be the easiest, and they are executed and executory. An executed contract is a contract that has been completed. An executory contract is a contract that has not been fully performed, so it is not completed yet. An executed example would be a promise being completed immediately, like a purchase of a product or service. An example of executory would be an apartment lease, promise to pay rent over a period of time. Now we move on to valid, void, unenforceable, and voidable contracts. Time for examples of each. Valid is pretty easy because you just need all the five elements. So an example would be selling your car to someone else for $1,000 and the other party accepting the offer. An easy example for void would be gambling because it is still illegal in most states. An example for unenforceable is a written or oral agreement that will not be enforced by courts. Lastly, an example of voidable is a lawyer contract. Both parties can avoid it. To wrap it up on types of contracts, we've got informal and formal. Examples of informal are leases, sales contracts, employees contracts. Examples of formal are checks, drafts, and promissory notes. Lastly, we have contract of records. It's a formal contract confirmed by the court accompanying a judgment. Thank you all for tuning in. I hope you all took something away from this video, and I hope you were able to implement at least one thing from this video into your everyday life.